Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Film for Fans podcast, the podcast from movie fans for movie fans. I am your host, Ryan Dunlevy. That is my co-host, Rob Dunham.
Hey, everybody.
Hey.
It's Oscar winner reveal time soon. Get excited.
Yes. Yeah.
Or don't.
Or don't, because you didn't see any of the movies.
Yeah.
So, hey, you can hear about how good they are. And, maybe you'll go see one or two of them. Anyway, we do have a good show for you. We will give you an update on the box office. So it'll actually be our first box office update in a while. We will go over, it will hit a particular movie that opens this weekend. We will, of course, touch on the Oscar winners from last night's Oscars. And then our discussion is going to be centered around Gene Hackman. And if you did not hear, Gene Hackman passed away this past week. So we thought we would dive into some of his filmography a little bit, and we'll talk about some of those. And then we'll hit up our watch list at the end. All right, Rob, you ready to get started?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Box office update. So for the third week in a row, Captain America: Brave New World takes home the number one spot in the box office. It did approximately 15 million. I pulled the numbers late last night, and so they weren't technically official because of the Sunday box office. So it did approximately 15 million this past weekend in its third week in the box office. 163.7 million in its 3-week reign in the box office. So solid, but not crazy.
Yeah.
Not crazy, but solid.
Not Marvel in its heyday.
No,
sure.
Definitely not. But not a train wreck.
Yeah.
So
not a DC or a Sony Marvel movie.
No.
By any stretch.
And not even some of their ones from past year or two.
Yeah.
But that finished number one.
I still feel like I should go see this.
I am gonna go see it either probably today or tomorrow, but yeah. I can't say I will go see it. I can't say I'm enthusiastic to go see it, which is obviously why I haven't seen it yet. Yeah. Whereas the day would have been in the heyday where opening night made arrangements.
It's no Mission Impossible, the last one for real this time. Yes. That's what they should call that movie, by the way.
They should. Yeah.
I just love in the trailer. I was like, I need you to trust me one last time. And I'm like, I don't even trust the words you're saying right now. How could I possibly?
Indeed.
Mission Impossible, make no more movies. That's actually the impossible mission.
Now, I do think there's a chance they'll make more. I do think there's also a chance that Tom Cruise will be done.
Impossible. I really should come up with a different word. The vocabulary is not very broad right now.
No, clearly.
That's one thing I think when we're recording. Like I know I use a lot of the same words, and I'm like, I need to learn some better adjectives.
Yes. So if any learning apps would like to sponsor the podcast and improve Rob's vocabulary, we could all use that.
Yeah.
Number 2 in the box office was Last Breath in its debut weekend. That's the underwater movie. That's the correct term. Underwater movie based on a real true life story. And it did $7.8 million, which for that type of movie, not too bad. It also was only in 2,500 theaters as opposed to the 3,900 theaters that Captain America was in. The Monkey finished at $6.3 million in its second week. That's down 54%. So about average second week drop off for The Monkey. The Monkey has made $24.5 million in its 2-week run. It did actually gain 27 theaters in week 2.
I think 24.5 million for the movie it is. I've seen it. It's pretty good. I mean, you're making a movie based on a short story, so you're adding a ton to the story. And I enjoy. We'll talk about this in the watch list, I think, but I enjoyed it, and I'll say why more later.
Okay. Number 4 was Paddington in Peru. Did $4.5 million. This one in 3 weeks has only done $31.3 million, which I have to believe they're disappointed in, because the first two Paddington movies were pretty successful,
Yeah,
and pretty well received, honestly.
mm-hmm.
Pretty well received by critics and fans alike. So I think the fact that the third one only did $31 million in 3 weeks, I think they would probably consider that not a success. And number 5 was Dogman, did $4.2 million. Dogman has done $84 million in 5 weeks, which is about $75 million more than I thought it
would. I mean, it is based on a popular children's book series, so I guess there's a built-in audience there.
I guess so.
Get there. Also, just a side note on Paddington, it appears that America is once again remaining undefeated against the British since like 1770 something. Yeah.
Indeed.
They should have thought about that before they released it when they did.
They should have.
Probably.
Yeah. Any thoughts on the box office that we haven't already shared?
There's not there's nothing huge. I mean, we're kind of in that time of year.
We are.
Is the Minecraft movie going to be huge? I'm skeptical.
I guess.
But then again, it's Minecraft.
Like, Minecraft is really popular, so there's got to be a built-in audience for Minecraft. And I'm guessing like the average age of Minecraft is like 12 to 16.
My son is all about it. He's 10.
Yeah,
so I might even skew a little.
A little younger. Yeah, that's possible. So it's hard for that to predict that audience,
because you've got Minecraft, you've got Jack Black, and you've got not Roman Reigns,
Momoa,
the actor who looks like Roman Reigns.
Is it Jason Momoa?
Yeah. Aquaman.
Yeah,
that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
And all three of those things are popular with different segments of the audience. So
yeah, it's going to come down to how much of that audience comes out to see it, because I don't think you're getting anyone else who's not a Minecraft fan.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll see. I think we're just in a bit of a lull, because it's not quite like, you don't quite get the dramas that you get closer to earlier at the release and some of the Oscars and some of that type of stuff. And you're not quite at the early summer movie season, like the May area. So you're kind of in that little bit of in between.
Yeah.
But there are some decent movies coming out. And let's talk about one.
Well, let's.
Mickey 17 comes out this coming weekend. Mickey 17, it's be hard to say which one is going to be more of an intrigue here. The director, Bong Joon-ho, famous for Parasite, which we broke down in incredible detail on our podcast last week. If you have not listened to our breakdown of Parasite, make sure you check out our podcast feed and go back and listen to that one. We get into a lot of cool stuff with that movie. But his next big movie is out coming this weekend. And Mickey 17 stars Robert Pattinson. And Mickey 17, known as an expendable, goes on a dangerous journey to colonize an ice planet. And there's lots of clones involved, lots of apparently random deaths of clones involved. The tone of the trailer is one that's kind of a drama comedy, and it will be interesting to see what comes out of this one. I've referenced it multiple times that I think the trailer, you see many things that take a lot from Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back in terms of visual and setting and scenery and even costuming. I think there's some interesting. I'm curious to see how prevalent that will be, especially because they're trying to colonize an ice planet. So there'll be lots of opportunity to look to the beginning of Empire Strikes Back there, which I think they did. What is your excitement level about this film? What are you expecting from it?
My excitement level is really high because of the director, and because the more I see of Robert Pattinson, the more I think he's a really good actor. So, and Mark Ruffalo too. I think he's a really good actor, and he looks like he's playing kind of a jerk in this movie, which I think is going to be. I think he's going to kill that role personally.
I think he embodies that role very well.
Yeah.
So he can manage that one. Yeah,
I'm excited about it, but I don't I don't know commercially how it's going to do.
They've really promoted it and been
Yeah.
promoting it for a long time. Now, I will say I've seen more of those promotions in the theater. I can't, I don't know how much I've seen it on TV or in ads, other kind of ads, but I've seen it a lot in theaters when I've gone to see. Um, yeah, yeah, I'm curious as to how well it would do. I like that it's got kind of a cool sci-fi premise, and so I'm hoping that it at least gives me something to be excited about, and then it'll be a movie that I would genuinely like and
Yeah.
appreciate, and not be like, well, it's the best thing that's in theaters right now, which is kind of the mode I've been operating on when I
Yeah.
go to the theaters like recently. So I'm hoping that this is able to deliver and actually have a movie that I really like to talk about.
I think it will be.
I think it will be.
I have high expectations for like personal liking of the movie.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be good. I think I like it. The trailer was intriguing. It was one that stood out to me immediately. That I'm like, okay, yeah. This one looks interesting, and we have a lot of respect for the director and what he's capable of.
Yeah, and this is obviously a way different movie than Parasite.
Way different movie.
Yeah,
and he's making a movie for English audiences.
Yeah.
Which is it's just cool. It's cool.
Unless there's a twist and there's actually Korean family in the space station.
That'd be kind of ironic. You never know. You never know. So it'll be interesting to see what he comes up with here and where he goes with this particular storyline. But I think it looks fun. All right. So now we will get to the Oscar winners. The big winner of the night was obviously Anora. Anora took home a number of prizes. I would say The Brutalist probably underperformed what expectations were, and Anora probably slightly exceeded. I think the general consensus might have been that Anora and The Brutalist would split more of the awards than they ended up splitting. So we'll go through each one of those in kind. We'll hit some of the major ones here. Actor in a leading role went to Adrian Brody for The Brutalist, over the likes of Timothée Chalamet, Ralph Fiennes, Sebastian Stan, and others. Actor in a supporting role went to Kieran Culkin for A Real Pain, which from everything I understand, like that was very well deserved, and that's one I really want to see, and just have not been able to find it, and we'll get to that one yet. Actress in a leading role went to Mikey Madsen for Anora. Actress in a supporting role went to Zoe Saldana for Emilia Perez. And cinematography went to Lowell Crawley for The Brutalist. I think, was it you or something who said costumes was going to go to Wicked? It went to Wicked.
Yeah.
Directing, we go right back to Anora for Sean Baker. Sean Baker wins Best Director. And also Sean Baker won Best Film Editing for Anora. And The Brutalist did win did win the music score for the Best Original Score for Daniel Blumberg. And Best Picture went to Anora. Production design went to Wicked. And we get Dune with a couple of the ones where you just knew they were going to throw Dune the bone. And then you get sound editing. Dune Part 2 wins, and visual effects, Dune Part 2 wins. Your writing awards, Best Adapted Screenplay went to Conclave. And the Best Original Screenplay goes back to Sean Baker for Anora. So obviously your big winner here is Anora. Thoughts?
Well, I think I said when the list came out that Anora and Brutalist were going to be the two big winners, just based on the reaction from when they first came out.
Yeah.
Through the fact that they got nominated for so many things. It just seemed inevitable, and I'm completely unsurprised, but I can't say I'm thrilled.
Yeah, it was pretty much a foregone conclusion, who's going to win most of these awards. None of them seem to be that contentious. I know you had your biggest one that you were surprised about was Timothy Chalamet for Best Actor.
Yeah, just the Academy seems to like the leading guy in a biopic.
Yeah,
if it's done with any kind of decency, and I thought he was very good in the role. I don't. It's a weird space to be in because I think more likely than not, The Brutalist and Anora are really good movies, and I still want to see both of them. So, are they worthy of the awards because they're really good movies? And that's the question. Because at what level does popular sentiment need to be a part of things? Because I think when I eventually see these movies, I'm probably going to think they're both really good, and maybe I'll think, yeah, Adrian Brody is absolutely deserving of Best Actor for this. But the question is the fact that the performance was good enough to justify an award that represents the whole of cinema?
Yeah.
And I think that's the problem the Academy has right now, because they're giving these awards to movies that may very well be incredible. The performances may very well be really good, but most of the people who are actually going to see movies will never know if they were or not. And the reason why I'm going to know is because I'm going to go out of my way to seek it out, because I feel like I need to watch it.
Yeah.
Because of how it's been recognized.
Even me in particular, I was looking to go see The Brutalist, but it was only in one of the theaters in our local area, and most of the time it did not have a later evening showing. So I would have literally had to like leave work early or like not put my daughter to bed in order to go see this movie. Like it was just really difficult to see. The show times were not great on it, but it's just, it exemplifies like this year does absolutely nothing to quell the continued disconnect between the Academy and the Hollywood in general and your average moviegoer. And I think once your awards stop representing like the stories that are told and that everyone resonates to, you've lost something and you've lost the people. And I think the Oscars have definitely gotten to a place where they've lost everybody. Nobody's going to remember these movies.
Yeah.
Like they're not going to make any impact whatsoever on the larger landscape of film. They just aren't.
I mean, and the main problem I have, the main issue I have is there should be something that recognizes what the popular movie going audience found the best for the year. But the things that do exist that represent those things, like the People's Choice Awards and et cetera, once the shows happen, they're forgotten about.
Yeah.
But the Oscars, for better or worse, are internal when it comes to movie history, because of the
legacy,
the gravitas, the legacy, the goodwill they built up over the course of the decades previous to now. So when you remove the ability of a popular movie to be recognized in that lasting light, to give it, I can't think of a better way to say that, you're doing a real disservice to almost everyone who goes to movies.
Yeah. Well, and I think part of the disconnect too is it's not that there has to be like, these are the really good movies, and then these are the movies that everyone goes to see. I think part of the problem is that Hollywood stopped making really good movies that people want to see. You know, like we talked about this when we've done Oscars reviews in the previous. You look at the movies that won in the 90s. Every single one of those, every single person in the US went to see. Like, let's just say Forrest Gump or, you know, Shawshank Redemption or The Fugitive or anything like. These were really good movies that everybody went to see. And Hollywood stopped making really good movies that people want to see. They make niche movies that they consider good for themselves, and they throw out like the latest sequel to everybody else. And it just like the whole operation and the whole mechanism of what they're doing just isn't working.
But there's not the frustration here is that there's not a ready solution, because even if you were to create award show X that is based on popular things, it probably never reach the level of acclaim that the Oscars get because of the importance that is put on it.
and this is why I think people like Christopher Nolan and Denis Villeneuve are really important because, and especially Christopher Nolan's win last year was so important because you have a director who is capable of creating amazing movies that everyone wants to see. He is that type of guy, and I think Denis is right in there in that same category. Although, clearly not. They just didn't. We're never going to vote for Dune.
Yeah,
They just never were. But like, I think those directors are important because Christopher Nolan can does now have the respect of the people who vote in the academies, but he also has the trust of the average moviegoer. And so I think maybe someone like Christopher is the type of person, like if you look at the directors, like that might be the one type of person in the right position to be able to make some changes over there, but you need a lot more Christopher Nolans.
yeah.
And you're not, one or two of them isn't going to do it. You need a lot more there, but we'll see.
And how do we make that happen? Because that might be a broader discussion for another time. But
Yeah.
you say Christopher Nolan now, I think of names like Robert Zemeckis or Steven Spielberg, like these directors who just make so many good popular movies that they kind of get to the point where they can make whatever they want. And there's just not that many of those people.
But they were, like, in particular, Spielberg and Zemeckis, most of their bigger films were in the era where those type of movies got consideration.
Yeah.
So I don't like, the main reason I mentioned Nolan is because he's the one who's here now, existing in this space and bridging that divide that didn't exist in the past.
Yeah. And we've talked at length about what is it about. We talked about this one in the episodes. What is it about him that made him that person? And for lack of knowing who that next person is going to be, things can feel pretty bleak. But before Christopher Nolan came, we didn't know that Christopher Nolan was coming. So, I mean, there could certainly be someone who's just at the beginning now, or someone who's not even started yet that is going to capture the imagination that way. And my other question would be, and this is more a philosophical question, but we're a movie podcast, so we talk about movies. Our primary objective from the beginning has been to talk about movies in a way that would be viewed as kind of a fan perspective, like not harping on negative things, not focused on nitpicking movies, but like sharing why we enjoy the movie viewing experience and what movies are giving us that enjoyment. By definition, we almost have to focus on what's winning these awards. But are we putting too much weight on it in our own psyche or in our own emotions and losing some of the satisfaction we had from the good movies that came out this year because they weren't recognized? Does it really matter? Is my question, like, on a personal level.
And that's the question, is like, how much do the Oscars matter anymore? That is a legitimate question. They're doing all they can to blow their own credibility. But that's an open question, because what I'm sitting here thinking is, what is the appropriate feedback mechanism? And is the Academy even capable of receiving any feedback? Because it seems like such an insular circle. Like, the Hollywood makes movies for the Academy. The Academy then rewards the Hollywood with those. So the movie goers seem to have virtually no entrance into this closed feedback loop at the moment. And so I don't know what incentives can be provided. I would have thought like the past several years would have provided enough feedback mechanism with the way the box office has gone that people are not happy with what they're putting out.
And this may not be the best analogy, and it's a little tone deaf, to be honest, but it does make me think that along this line that one of the big complaints about the NFL in general when it comes to hiring coaches is minority hiring, and the Rooney Rule that they put in place that you have to interview X amount of candidates who are minorities before you can make a choice as a head coaching job. And in a lot of ways, in a lot of scenarios, we found that to be laughable or not even mattering because they've already decided before they've interviewed someone.
Yeah.
And you can't really tell like the team like, hey, you can't decide before you interview. So it's for show.
Yeah.
So when the Academy expanded the Best Picture list to 10, I kind of feel it's analogous to that. Like it's just a show.
Yeah.
They're never gonna award these movies with Best Picture. They're never gonna award these movies with a leading actor or actress award, but they're throwing them in there just because that's their way of saying, okay, we see what's popular.
Yeah.
Like we see what movies you like. So your reward is being told that you finished 4th out of 5.
Yeah.
And to me, I don't think that's much of a reward.
No, it isn't. So we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see. All right. Well, we got to move on. So we are going to move on to our discussion of Gene Hackman and Gene Hackman movies. As we said earlier, many of you saw that he passed away this past week. We don't know a whole lot about the circumstances, although it seems a little odd / suspicious. So if and when more comes out, maybe we'll.
Yeah, I mean, we did a breakdown on the Rust situation when that happened, when we had a little more detail of like timeline and who was responsible for what. And I do think it would be unfair at this point to say anything about that scenario because it would be conjecture because no one knows.
Yes.
So I think I do think it is our responsibility as the podcast to inform you guys once we know something, because everybody's not going out of their way to find out what happened.
Yeah.
Especially because it's going to be lost in the news cycle, I think, at this point, because it's been a couple of weeks. Like people are they're not gonna care like why it happened. So once we know something concrete, we'll let you guys know. But suffice to say, there's a lot of something weird happened.
Yes. And the only thing we know is that they have classified it as suspicious.
Yeah.
And that basically the idea was stuff looks odd or weird or things like that. And so they classified it as suspicious to give it a higher level of investigation.
And I mean, Gene Hackman, his wife, and one of his 3 dogs all died in this scenario, whatever it was. So it wasn't just 3 random natural events, circumstances happening concurrently. Something happened, but we just don't know what yet.
Okay, so what we are going to do today, though, is we're going to talk about some of our favorite Gene Hackman movies. Gene Hackman, if you're one of our younger audiences, you may not be super familiar with Gene Hackman. His last official film credit, as far as I can tell, was 2004. So we're talking over 20 years since Gene Hackman put out a movie, which kind of surprised me because I feel like he's kind of been an ever-present thing.
Yeah, though I listened to a lot of people talking about him this week, and one of the things they said was that he kind of just went away.
Yeah.
He like retired without announcing he was retiring. And then when people would call him up to do stuff, he would just say, I'm retired. Like he wouldn't even do interviews. Like he's been on his ranch there for a while. And he just kind of was over the Hollywood lifestyle and spotlight and felt like he had done enough.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to say briefly that I thought was really, really cool that I heard in an interview. Somebody asked him in an interview how he would want his career to be remembered. And his response was, I tried. And having had a chance to watch back some of his movies and thinking about some of his other movies, I don't know if he ever really got the level of respect he should have gotten for how good of an actor he was. And I think he's going to get that now. And it's a shame that this just kind of is what happens when you're stuck in the moment with somebody. And that's why I mentioned Robert Pattinson earlier. Like I'm trying to be more open-minded to recognizing a great actor when I see one, because I don't want to miss out. And not realize it until it's too late,
And I think maybe some of that has to do, and this goes into a little bit about the type of actor Gene Hackman is I wouldn't say he was typecast. I wouldn't go that far, but I will say he tended to play similar roles. He tended to play a somewhat curmudgeonly individual, at times a little bit lovable and likable, and at times like not at all lovable and likable. But there was always a level of like curmudgeonly,
harassable.
Yeah. Yes. See, there you go. Vocabulary already improved.
I just have to think about it.
And like, there's a little bit of level of jerkiness to him, off-putting at times. But those are essential characteristics to making good movies. There's some Jack Nicholson who would be a comparable actor, although he doesn't chew the scenery as much as Jack Nicholson tends to do. He's a little bit more within his role along those lines. So I think in some ways that may hurt him when you tend to play those type of characters or you play them frequently. People may not realize the level of depth there is to some of those characters and the precision with which he played them on a regular basis. So we came up with our list of some of the best Gene Hackman movies, and we're gonna break down two particular ones. So we can let's give our top 5 lists, and then we'll break down the 2 ones that we want to focus on here specifically.
So should I just go through my top?
Yeah, just go for yours.
My top 5, number 5 is a admittedly selfish pick based on who directed the movie and the fact that it was his first major movie. I mean, Bottle Rocket came out, and the second movie. I don't know how I'm blanking on, but it's Wes Anderson's first like commercial successful movie was The Royal Tenenbaums, and Gene Hackman plays the patriarch of that family in that movie, and you got to see a little bit more of his personality in that. He was definitely that gruff guy, but like in a quirky, funny way, like the archetype of the disappointed father.
Yeah,
Gene Hackman in that movie. It does kind of make me wonder how his own kids felt about him. That's another story for another time. My number 4 would be The Firm. Which, might be higher on some other people's lists, but it's a great, that Grisham Crichton, that drama, that lawyer courtroom drama genre that we saw recently in Juror Number 2, and it's kind of like not as prevalent right now. And I think more movies like that would be good. I like that style of movie. I do too. When you have to bring in things outside of what's just happening in the courtroom, to make it make sense, make the storyline propel forward. My number 3 would be Enemy of the State, if we're going to talk about. My number 2 would be Hoosiers. Hoosiers would probably be number 1 for a lot of people. And rightly so, fairly, especially if you're a sports fan, because
it's one of the great sport movies.
It is. And I got to hear people talk about Gene in that movie a lot this week, listening to sports radio. And I was fascinated by some of the things I heard, because when this movie was being made, Gene Hackman thought it was going to be terrible. In fact, one of the things I heard was he sat down with Dennis Hopper, and this is related by Dennis Hopper, that he sat down with him and said, I hope you have another job lined up after this, because this movie's going to tank. And when he finally saw the first cut of it, the screenplay writer said he came into the room with him and the director, and he said, I don't know how, but you guys did it. And I mean, just imagine, it's very hard to imagine seeing what Hoosiers ended up being,
that you would be very worried about
being that so negative about it.
Yeah.
Like he just didn't think it was going to succeed. And it is probably going to be one of the most lasting movies of the 20th century related to sports.
And I think it might be, I mean, you tell me if I'm wrong here, Hoosiers might be the role that most people think of Gene Hackman for. Like, might be one of the first ones that comes to most people's mind when they think of Gene Hackman, might be Hoosiers. It might be something else. But I would guess Hoosiers will be up there for most people in terms of their first recognition of Gene Hackman. All right.
So my number 1, my personal number 1 would be Crimson Tide. And we're going to talk about that one.
We are.
So I'll save my thoughts about that for a little later here.
Yeah. Number 5 for me would be Absolute Power. This is a Clint Eastwood as well, stars opposite him, and he plays the president of the United States, which is not the first time he played the president, or not the last time he played the president. But Gene Hackman has uh, basically gets involved, and there's a murder, and Clint Eastwood witnesses the murder, and then it's a back and forth game between Clint Eastwood and Gene Hackman and some other, as they try to hunt him down. He tries to get over on them. So interesting movie, and it's another one where he kind of plays the jerk and the womanizer and like that sort of role. So number 5 is Absolute Power. Number 4 for me would be The Firm as well. I really like his character in The Firm because you have the tough, hard exterior on his role, the mentor lawyer, the friend, the womanizer again. But at the end, you kind of see how miserable and desperate he is, and how he kind of like both gives up and like protects them a little bit. So there's more depth to his character than lesser movies would, or lesser actors would have been able to bring to that specific role. And I think he's more nuanced in that one than you would think would be necessary for that character. So I think that's great on the writing and great on the acting there. Number 3 for me would be Enemy of the State. And we're going to talk about that one a little bit more. And I really did go back and forth between Hoosiers and Crimson Tide. And so close. I put Hoosiers 2 and Crimson Tide 1.
Okay.
Yeah. And the reason I went back and forth, I think Crimson Tide is an amazing movie. The question for me back and forth was, I would say Hoosiers is a Gene Hackman centered movie. Crimson Tide is a Denzel and Gene Hackman dual centered.
But I will say it's not a Denzel Washington movie.
It's not a Denzel Washington.
Very much.
No, it is both and.
Yeah.
And though they're both and that's ultimately, that dynamic is why I ended up elevating it slightly, because Denzel is one of the best actors of the generation and most popular actors and most likable actors. And Gene Hackman shared the screen with him, and it was 1A and 1B. And they went back and forth, and they were
very much not the same generation either, which I think you don't see a whole lot of movies where you have two huge stars in their own right.
Yes.
Who both put in that level of performance.
Yes. And so that's ultimately why I ranked it number 1 as opposed to Hoosiers. But it was a tough decision.
Yeah.
Like they are the 2 best ones that I can see. Now, caveats here. I hear French Connection 1971 was very, very good. In fact, that movie gets referenced a lot in reference to the Bourne Identity in terms of the car chases and the comparables on those. I hear the French Connection is amazing. I've just never gotten around to watching it. It's one of those like movies that old kind of disappear for me.
Yeah.
Like I have to have a very good reason to come back and watch it. I just never have.
You would have watched it if it was called James Bond: The French Connection.
I would have been more likely to have seen it, partially because of the ubiquity of James Bond.
Yeah.
Like how many movies from the 70s are even like randomly on television?
Yeah.
Or at your previously your local video store, or like now like your local library. Like they're just not around as much and not as easily accessible as they are in other places. But so there are other Gene Hackman roles. Mississippi Burning would be another one where he played a big role. I do like the 80s spy film No Way Out, which also features Gene Hackman, and Kevin Costner stars opposite him. But I think these are our 5 favorite. So let's get into them. Let's do Enemy of the State first. So we both of us watched Enemy of the State and Crimson Tide this week, and we thought we'd give a little bit of extra color on these particular movies to give you a little bit of sense of Gene and some of the movies he was in, and just some of the movies in general. So
I mean, kind of looking at both movies for me, Crimson Tide, you've got the guy who's fully committed to following the directive of the government as best as he can figure it. And Enemy of the State, you've got a guy who doesn't want to do anything the government tells him to do.
Yes, and he completely wants away from
completely burnt out and over it. Enemy of the State is really cool because you don't really often see an old guy, not Scott Sturges, but you don't see like an old guy being the techie guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I really like that dynamic. In fact, what makes it even cooler is he's being the guide for Will Smith.
He's the mentor character.
Yeah, like the one explaining everything to him. And just overall, the cast of this movie is insane. The amount of quality actors who are in this movie, even in the small bit parts, like Jack Black, Jason Lee,
John Voight,
and it just the list goes on and on and on in the movie, and it's got a great development as far as story goes, I think, because you've got a bunch of different threads it's pulling at all at the same time, but it manages to link them together in a way that makes it coherent. And Gene Hackman he doesn't even show up until like the second half of the movie. But he's kind of the driving force of the movie, because the movie is going somewhere, but then once he actually shows up and you find out that he's the guy, the guy in the chair, the mysterious guy that no one can figure out who it is, he's what pushes the rest of the movie. So he's I think this would have been billed as a Will Smith movie, but I don't think that it gets to the level it does without Gene Hackman's performance.
Yeah, because I think Will Smith is kind of like being bounced along the walls. Like Will Smith's role, like he's almost never in control of it until he gets the idea at the very end of the movie and turns it around. Up until that, he's basically being bounced around the various entities that are after him and trying to get to him. And Gene Hackman is the one trying to steer him through all of this. And they have the dynamic and the interesting interplay between them is really good, because they're not exactly friends. They kind of dislike each other, but they kind of like each other. That weird, like frenemy almost dynamic to it. But it provides a lot of interesting dynamics. Like he doesn't want to care about Will Smith, but he does kind of care about Will Smith. He gets angry at him, but then he realizes, like, okay, he can help me too.
It's almost like he said he's thinking, "You're so stupid. How could you have done that?" And then he realizes because he didn't know any better.
Yeah. Or there is a moment where he actually does, like in a fight, he does actually save Gene Hackman there for a second, and Gene doesn't really want to acknowledge that. His character, bro. So it's just kind of that fun. Again, he's playing that kind of curmudgeonly character who hates the government, was screwed over by the government, all this type of stuff. Paranoid. I think my favorite line is the Gene Hackman line. What's happening? I blew up the building. Why'd you blow up the building? Because you made a phone call. Like that's the lasting line that I remember from that movie. Because you made a phone call.
It's interesting how in a lot of ways it's kind of like blockbustery, but it's also got some real serious themes in it. I feel the same way about Crimson Tide.
Yeah. And these two movies are kind of, there's been a deeper project I've been working on for a while that I work on periodically. Both of these movies, for different things, are like textbook representation of those two themes. I'll talk about the other one when we get to Crimson Tide. But this one is the rise in technology in the late 90s, the rise of computer technology in the late 1990s, and how Hollywood movies reacted to the tension and growing fear around the increase of technology and the computer age that took hold in the late 90s. And this movie is an exemplar of that particular genre and that particular thread that existed in the movies at that point.
And this movie is much more dynamic and chaotic than Crimson Tide is.
Yes.
But what's fascinating is that both movies were directed and produced by the exact same people. Yeah. So Jerry Bruckheimer and Don Simpson produced both Crimson Tide and Enemy of the State, and Tony Scott directed both films.
I would say that Enemy of the State has more of the textbook characteristic director styles that I would associate with Tony Scott, more so than Crimson Tide, and I think the nature of it being a sub movie.
And I don't know if it's just I don't know if it's just a representation of the fact that it's like so tech driven, but it seems like there's way more than two movies, way more than 2 years between these two movies.
Yeah, to me, it does, doesn't it?
Like Crimson Tide feels locked in like that Cold War era, and this feels locked and maybe a little less locked in technology because we're always driving towards that technology. What's technology going to do angle?
And what's interesting is what's kind of interesting is to place the enemy of the state. Everyone was worried about the rise of the tech surveillance state. Now everyone just kind of has accepted that it's here.
Yeah.
Like it just kind of like, yeah, there's no way around it. So there's not the same level of consternation that there was at that point. Now, I'm not saying that's a good thing.
Yeah.
It's just everyone has just kind of accepted that that's become a reality.
There's a lot of crazy things they show in that movie that like you can do yourself on your phone.
Right now. And that would have represented like this was supposed to be like the height of like government surveillance technology, like more advanced than anything else that you could see. Yeah, it's interesting to go back and look at it.
Yeah, because I do remember watching this movie when it came out. I was like, wait, they can do that stuff. But then again, some of the stuff, it's like, can they do that? And you're like, no, they still can't.
So that, like, for instance, I was listening to a podcast about Mission Impossible, the original one, and they said they talked to some CIA people. Well, what security measures do you use? They were trying to get the vault scene going, and he's like, well, we have like a camera. I was like, really? Like, you guys have a camera? Yeah, I've got a camera and like a security guard. And I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like, that's not going to work.
It's not very possible.
That's not very possible. But I think that's fascinating. Let's move on to Crimson Tide. So Crimson Tide came out in 1995, stars Denzel Washington and Gene Hackman. It is a submarine movie. It is a classic submarine movie. The basic premise is Denzel Washington gets put on Gene Hackman's sub as the XO, the second in command, as a replacement for the previous XO who was out with appendicitis. And they go on a mission, and there's Russian separatists who take over a nuclear facility and are threatening to launch their missiles. So that's kind of the predicate around this. The main crux of it is, at one point during the mission, they were ordered to launch their nuclear weapons from the submarine. They get another message related to that nuclear launch, but it gets cut off before they can read it. So the question for the entire movie is, do they launch their missiles or don't they? Gene Hackman's character comes down the side of we launch the missiles. Denzel's comes on the side of we don't launch the missiles until we read the thing. And it becomes mutiny versus counter mutiny versus who's right and who's wrong, and the dynamics here. So talk about
one point you're asking how many mutinies are in this thing. Watching this movie again, having not watched it in a while, I think the thing that makes Gene Hackman's performance so good in this is a lot of his internal struggle is kind of seen on his face until it gets to the point where he explodes. But he's not always exploding, but he's always feeling. And I think he does a great job of portraying that. And in order for Denzel Washington's character to have impact and be paid attention to, you have to have that kind of understated performance as a base. Otherwise, there's nothing for it to be in contrast to.
Yeah.
And I think they're both great in the movie. I've seen a lot of actors. I don't know if anyone could really have pulled the role of the commander off quite like Gene Hackman does in the movie. And it's not, other than a couple of times where he like loses his temper at him, it's not this super bombastic performance. In fact, like when he finally snaps and swears at him, you're like, whoa, like I can see it coming, but I'm still kind of surprised
it's one of those level where you can always tell he's almost always kind of on edge, but always seems to diffuse it. Like he'll throw a humorous line or throw a cut in there and then be done with it. Like it never quite rises until it gets to a boiling point. He's like, enough. But what's awesome about it is there's a lot of character depth in it, because between the two characters you have like the highly experienced veteran sub commander versus the relatively young, up and coming, highly touted guy. Yeah. So there's a little bit of rivalry, a little bit of jealousy. There's the Denzel's character went to Harvard. The other guy was basically just like a career Navy man.
Yeah.
So there's those dynamics back and forth. They don't know each other very well.
Yeah.
Like they're on this critical mission and there's not the level of relationship, equity, and trust built in. So neither one of them knows how to read the other one yet they're put in the like life or death, like world altering situation, and they don't have the trust. And like they both portray that really well, because you can see it, like they want to kind of trust the other one, but they don't know them enough to trust them. And so this dynamic just goes back and forth. And
I think Denzel Washington's character still does want like the approval of Gene Hackman's character, even though he's not going to come out.
He's your commanding officer.
Yeah.
Like you want to try and
the one line that sticks out most to me in that dynamic is when Gene Hackman says, "It seems like you've really got the pulse of the crew," and like it not meant as a compliment at all.
No.
And that line just kind of brought into clarity to me, like, wow, he doesn't respect this guy.
Well, and I think he feels jealous of that.
Yeah.
In that moment, like he's reacting out of jealousy. He's like, because Gene Hackman's clearly he's not a guy who's going to have the pulse of the men. He's not. And instead of viewing Denzel as an ally in this, well, I can use his skills because they're different than mine. It's like, no, I'm going to put him down in his place. Yeah. And he does that, and that continues to erode the relationship.
And how he says that on the ship we defend democracy, but we don't practice.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that speaks to a lot of just military culture in general.
Yep. And I think what made this so good is there's an element where, and they talk about this at the end of the movie, the tension revolves around the fact that they're both right and they're both wrong. And the situation is something that the Navy clearly hadn't planned for. And it's kind of like exists within a loophole, as it were. And so you can see where each character is coming from and why each side represents the side they do and why they care so much about that side. And so that's what makes it so compelling. And both of them defend their side to the best of their abilities. And that's where the Hackman performance is necessary, because this could easily fall into a trope of, well, obviously Denzel's right.
Yeah.
Denzel's the good guy. Denzel's the guy. Obviously he has to be right. And you do feel that throughout the movie. You do feel like you're on Denzel's side.
Yeah.
Like they do set up Gene Hackman as the adversary, but he's not like a cartoon villain.
And when it ends, when you think about it, if you put any thought into it whatsoever, you have to come to the conclusion that neither of them were bad guys.
No.
That they were both fully in belief that they were doing what was right.
Yes.
And it's hard to argue that either one of them is inherently wrong.
And they each have moments where they hash out their side of the argument. And in the heat of the moment, like they just cannot come to common ground on this until they're utterly forced to.
Both of them might have been right, but both of them did some pretty stupid stuff.
Yeah.
And you get that explained and adjudicated by the panel at the end, the naval-based panel.
Yeah. And so this is just like, it's one of the great sub movies of all time, military movies of all time. It clearly was paying some homage to Hunt for Red October. You look at the original covers of the two films, they definitely take some, like the artwork takes some colors, like the black on red effect that were in both movies. Also, like when the sub is initially diving in Crimson Tide, they have like a men's choir singing as the sub descends.
Yeah.
Whereas, that's an homage to Hunt for Red October, where they have like they're singing the Russian national anthem as the sub descends.
Seems to be just the Cold War movie, sub movie and themes.
And this is where like that second theme I've been working on for a larger project is that early to mid 90s, like a huge thread that Hollywood pulled on is the idea of, okay, the Soviet Union is over, and the fear of what was going to happen and what was going to come in its place. There were so many movies, and that characterized like most of the decade of the 90s. So like, what do we do with the instability of Russia, the former Soviet Union? And so there's so many movies that lay out that premise of like this separatist movement or this offshoot or this Russian thing collapses. And what like the chaos that could emerge out of the collapsing Soviet Union was a real thread that Hollywood mined tremendously. And I think this is part of that other story of going back to what we were talking about with the Oscars, and then we'll get back to Gene Hackman for a second. But Hollywood used to have a better sense of what the broader thought of the nation was, what some of the themes the average person was wrestling with, and what was happening and going on. It was better able to pick those things out in a way that related to the average person. They don't have that anymore. So, but again, masterful performance from Gene Hackman and Denzel. But I think he has the gravitas to hang in there with Denzel on the acting chops and make this a compelling movie. Because with the lesser actor, it would not have been as good.
Right. Agreed.
I will also say I did watch Heartbreakers with Gene Hackman as well. Not one of Gene Hackman's best performances, as he plays an absolute cartoonish, like old money, like tobacco guy.
Yeah.
And he's just walking around like with this red nose, like hacking up along everywhere he goes. But it's funny. It's funny. And it has Jason Lee in it.
Yeah.
But yeah. If you haven't seen any of these movies, definitely check out Gene Hackman, check out some of his filmography, view a few of these movies, and would love to chat about it at some point. All right. Anything else you saw this week?
I did see The Monkey in theaters.
Okay.
I guess that would have been not the Sunday that just happened, but the Sunday before that. Based on a short story by Stephen King about a toy monkey that doesn't come to life, but like has power to, if you wind it up, it plays its cymbals and its drum, and a random person dies.
Yeah.
And the only rule is that the person who turns the thing on the back of the monkey can't be the one who dies. It's very dark humor, but I found myself laughing quite a bit. One scene in particular that did that for me, will give you a general vibe of the whole movie, is they do this montage of like all the people in Maine who died, because it's set in Maine, because it's Stephen King, obviously. And they say, and there was the lady on the golf course, and they show this lady reaching into the hole to get her ball, and a cobra jumps out and bites her neck and kills her. And the response to the person hearing this is, "There's cobras in Maine?" And the person says, "Well, at least the one." It's just the whole movie is absurd, and there were lots of times I was just saying to myself, "What is that?" But in a good way. I did also watch the most recent Sonic movie again. It's now on streaming on Paramount. My kids really like the Sonic movies, and Keanu Reeves playing a bad kind of version of the Sonic character is pretty cool. He actually ends up being a good guy in the end. But and Jim Carrey, although these movies are not the highest of cinema, seeing Jim Carrey completely commit to any role that he does, because that's what he does. He's absolutely a cartoon in this movie, but he's playing a cartoon.
Yeah.
So Dr. Robotnik, and he is Dr. Robotnik. I love it. He actually plays himself twice in this movie, because he also plays his grandfather. And there's one scene in the movie where he and the grandfather they're filming it, and it's showing both of them, and it's almost like we're the same actor playing two different characters in the same movie. And they just like both look at the camera, and it's so funny. I love it. I love movies that are self-aware like that and willing to make fun of themselves.
Yeah. I was on a 90s movie binge this week, so I also watched Contact.
Great.
Another amazing movie from the 90s. Jodie Foster, great. Matthew McConaughey, great. I love the storyline. I love the build up. It's one of the most realistic, grounded of the like aliens, alien first contact movies that you would see. It's much more drama than it is like action, but it has some great moments to it. Yeah. It really does. And it has one of the all-time great shots, like scene shots, when his Jodie Foster's character, when she's younger, runs up to get the medicine. Like that shot is amazing. Yeah, it is so good. And there's like some moments of real special cinematography and directing. Robert Zemeckis, who we mentioned earlier, did that one. All right, that is all the time we have. Thanks for checking out Film for Fans. Make sure you go to filmforfans.com, our top 10 movies. If you want to know what the real best movies were over the last year, you need to go to Film for Fans and check out our top 10 movies. Until next time, enjoy the movies.